That's working. Good morning, good afternoon, good middle of the day, good whenever it is, everybody. Today, we are talking about something different. For the last couple of weeks, I feel we've been chasing the dragon, trying to get the strongest man alive. And it's just not a question that can really be answered. As we talked about on our Monday episode, we don't know for a fact who is the strongest man alive. We don't know how to determine that person. So I figured, let's go back to our roots. Let's go back to different sports. Let's go back to stuff that, maybe includes a little violence, maybe includes a little danger, maybe, possibly, definitely includes a little bit, fair amount of death. We are talking today about a sport that was inspired by the feelings I'm feeling now. You're completely snowed in, you're hungry, you're tired, you're cold, you need food to survive. I only really subscribe to one of those things because it's snowy everywhere, but we are talking about the ancient pursuit turned into the modern sporting endeavor, biathlon. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, the skiing, shooting extravaganza. We are talking about biathlon. Welcome to the Building Ambition podcast. I am Ben Semenak. This is another Thursday mini episode, and today might actually be mini. Last week got off the rails, went on for an hour. It was good, I feel, but just exhausting, and I don't have another one in me right now. So we're going to try to tackle something a little bit more straightforward than old-time strongmen and mythical feats of strength. Just talking about biathlon. If you guys have been listening to the podcast, which I know a lot of you follow closely, you will have heard me really just kind of bitching about all the snow. It's surrounded me. It's terrible. And I wanted to do something snowy, something to make our Southern Hemisphere listeners very confused. Australians, hello, we know you're listening. If you want to tag us in pictures of sun, so we remember what that's like, just tag Adam and I on Instagram or Facebook. We'd appreciate it. Tag it at Building Ambition. I just want to see what sun looks like again. Canadian listeners, tag me in greater amounts of snow so I don't feel that bad. But this is really where the sport of biathlon originates, is in the snowy regions of Scandinavia, the cold north, where you have to fight to survive. And this is something we discussed on our Arctic Games episode, where it's cold, it's desolate. You have to fight every single day just to survive in this harsh environment. And everyone is accustomed to it. Everyone knows that. But that's when you're there. And you get adapted to it. Now, if you drop one of us in there, probably wouldn't survive that well. But this is something where for possibly thousands of years, people have been doing this pursuit. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, the biathlon, not biathlon, biathlon is rooted in the skiing traditions of Scandinavia, where early inhabitants revered the Norse god Ullr, spelled Ullr, as both the ski god and the hunting god. Now, this is an ancient belief system, an ancient tradition, where, again, since we're talking about all of our maybe historically inaccurate, hard to date things, this has a set of dates to it that vary fairly wildly. Skiing is reported to have been as old as about 6,000 years in Scandinavia, but we can only confidently place it with written historical documentation and physical evidence to about 500 AD. Now, there are records of people in what is now China, formerly was not China, but in 500 BC, doing something similar to skiing as we know it now. And it would have been cross-country skiing, sitting on longboards, cruising across the snow to go move a little quicker, move a little farther through the snow. And for the Norse, we can ballpark it at 6,000 years. We can ballpark it at 15,000 years. These people have been doing it for a while. And it's primarily for either transportation or hunting is what they do. Obviously, in the deep snow, you don't want to be walking that entire distance, so you tend to try to make easier ways of doing things. In North America, snowshoeing is very popular. Making your footprint bigger makes walking on top of the snow easier. And in Scandinavia, skiing was the preferred method. So most of the people there use skiing for transportation just to get around during the winter, which is long, it is snowy, it is relatively terrible, and that's all a matter of perspective, but it is not the most hospitable terrain to live in, and climate and all that. So they took skis out hunting to chase after food, and with this, they had some sort of weaponry. Now, at first, it wasn't a gun. Guns didn't come around until, off the top of my head, I think it was like the 1300s in China, but then they've moved to Europe a little bit later than that. Of course, with matchlock, then flintlock, the propagation of black powder throughout the European continent, blah, 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 no one cares. But primarily this was done chasing after caribou with maybe spears, maybe bows. But this sport really got integrated into Scandinavian culture, not as a sport, but as a way of life. If we go back to the Scottish Highlands game episode, it's a good foundation, good basis for a lot of sports is just your daily life and trying to survive and trying to make it a little bit more fun, trying to make it a little exciting. And with this, people would hunt for food, textiles, crafting materials, but the tradition continued with those who lived in the area for years and years because first off, they had to do it, but second off, it was good to be good. It was good to be efficient. And even after it wasn't completely necessary, that heritage still held on pretty strongly. In 1861 in Norway, one of the world's first known ski clubs, the Tirsil Rifle and Ski Club, was formed to promote both national defense and recreation at this local level. Now, again, we talk about the weaponry involved. In 1861, they had to defend themselves. They had to be prepared to use firearms from skis. It's just a way of life. They had to do that. They had to be prepared. So they had these camps. They had everything going on for years and years and years. And a big payoff happened in 1939. Now, 1939 was the start of the World War II in Europe, but this specific date in Finland marks the Winter War, in which the Soviet Union attempted and successfully invaded Finland, but not without Finnish resistance. And the Finnish resistance held strong with guerrilla tactics mostly. They were outnumbered, they were out-educated, they were just out-equipped, out-everything, essentially. But what the Finns had going for them was a strong history of being able to use rifles, being able to use weapons, and being able to move comfortably in the snow from skis. Now, these hit-and-run guerrilla tactics paid off. It pushed the Russians back for a while, or I should say the Soviets back for a while. Ultimately, in March, the snow melted. The Russians just walked all over the Finns. But it brought the importance of being able to function properly in the snow to the forefront of military leaders' minds. And from this occasion, the proliferation of skiing as a military exercise really expanded throughout Europe and even into America. Now, America's famous mountaineering troop, their Alpine Division, is the 10th Infantry Division out of Colorado. It was originally activated as the 10th Light Division in 1943, during World War II, they were trained to ski on the slopes, they were trained to move around in the snow, and they were trained for combat in the mountains. After the war, the division was deactivated, but quickly reactivated and redesignated as the 10th Infantry Division in 1948, which it's now currently known as. And this division is famous for its pioneering of mountain combat, mountain concealment, mountain camouflage, and they got pretty well known outside of the military community in 2017, where the Army sported the coolest jerseys in the Army-Navy game in 2017. And if you're watching this on the video, which I hope to actually be able to play, you'll get to see some of the videos or the pictures. It's just this clean, all-white look. And in the game in Philadelphia, it was just snowing, complete whiteout conditions. So they had the perfect snow camo for a football game. And it's a great ode to the 10th Mountain Division. As you can see in this picture, those of you that are watching on YouTube, great white uniforms blending in to the ground. Some of you can see it, some of you can't, but whatever. Trust me on this one. Great white uniforms, just concealed. And there were only 3 passes that game, and it was an atrocious game to watch if you like anything in the air. But man, was that cool. Going off of my football, we'll actually talk about the sport of biathlon itself now. So with this prominence in the military, as I was talking before I got off on the tangent, the military proliferation of this event was really what brought it to the forefront of people's minds and made people think that it's possibly a good idea to do this competitively. Now, it started as a sport, in all honesty, before World War II. It was called military patrol, and it was a combination of skiing and shooting. It was an exhibition in the Winter Games in 1924. It was demonstrated in 28, 36, and 48, but didn't get Olympic recognition because really only the Finns and the Swedes and the Norwegians were competing in it because they had the strong history of it, and they were really the only ones that have been doing it for hundreds of years. But after this, we had a lot of people join in because they saw the military benefit. They wanted to train people, and civilians got in on it as well. So it stopped being such a military patrol focus and started becoming a recreational pursuit. So during the mid-1950s, the biathlon was introduced to Soviet and Swedish winter sport circuits, was widely enjoyed by the public. The newfound popularity aided the effort of having the biathlon gain entry into the Winter Olympics. And in 1960 in Squaw Valley, California, they finally made it. It got to be an Olympic sport for the first time ever, and it was so cool back then. And I try not to say cool because it's a snow joke. It was cool, like it was interesting, it was exciting, and it was wild because they were using full-size military rifles. Now, if you watch today, they are using smaller rifles. We'll get into that later. When you watch back in the day, the earth is just shaking with rifle rounds, and it is something beautiful. It speaks to my soul that people are going out there and using full military sniper rounds to just shoot targets and go cross-country skiing. It is beautiful to hear that concussion, watch the explosions on the range. But these guys were going out there with calibers like 30-06 and the 7.62 by 51, which is a NATO round. It is a worldwide round, but it's something that you take deer hunting, essentially, if you are going for recreation. Today, they use something a little bit smaller. They switched it to the 22 caliber rifle in 1978, which is more along the lines of a squirrel hunting gun, or if you were going to go shoot rabbits or other small game, that's what they do. So less explosion, less concussive force, less excitement, really, but probably higher safety factor a little bit because they can control the rounds a little bit better downrange. So other changes in tech happen too, mostly on the target side of things. Now we can talk about the increase in ski technology, but that might be a different episode. We we'll talk about the origins of people just scooting around on wood planks cross-country skiing. Now it's a different style of skiing. It's going to a skate ski more than an inline cross-country ski. The blades or the skis themselves are made of fiberglass or other composite materials, so they're higher tech, lower friction coefficients, all that good stuff. There's a lot of science put into it now that, quite honestly, doesn't excite me that much. So not going to talk about it too much, but if you go dig deep into the science, the skis are better, the poles are better, the suits are better, everything is better. But the main things you'd notice right off the bat are that they're using smaller guns, unfortunately, and the targets have changed. So they started out as paper targets where you're just shooting a hole in a paper target. Used to be from a larger distance away, about 200 to 150 yards away. More recently, the targets have moved in, they've got smaller, and they have changed to self-indicating targets. So you shoot it, and it flips out of the way so you can see clearly if you shot it or not. And now there are electronic targets that can definitively tell you if you hit it or not. So, brings us to, well, how is this sport even competed in? How do you even play this sport, or how do you even ski in this sport? Should be the better question. And Wikipedia describes it as a biathlon competition consists of a race in which contestants ski through a cross-country trail system whose total distance is divided into either 2 or 4 shooting rounds, half in prone and half in standing position. Now, prone is when you're laying on your stomach, standing is when you're standing, obviously. And depending on the shooting performance, extra distance or time is added to the contestant's total skiing distance / time. The contestant with the shortest total time wins. So as we're saying, the combination of skiing and shooting really is the forefront of this event. And let's face it, it's the entire event itself. Going back to the military heritage and even back to the sporting heritage of hunting, of surviving, you needed to make every single shot count, and you needed to make sure you could ski efficiently. You wanted to get to what you were hunting, and you wanted to make sure you could shoot it. So the penalties now are not that you go hungry, you starve, you freeze, but they are added time or added distance to the event. And a couple common penalties are skiing around a 150-meter penalty loop, which usually takes 20 to 30 seconds, but it will increase your heart rate, it'll increase all your adrenaline, gets you going in that regard, which for this sport, you want a steady heart rate, so your gun's not moving all over the place. You can add a minute to the skier's total time, which saves your heart rate a little bit. You don't have to ski any extra, but then you have another minute that you have to make up. And there's also penalty for use of an extra cartridge at the shooting range to hit the target. You can only use 3 extras per round, and a penalty loop must be done for each target left standing. So there are pretty severe penalties in this sport, especially considering the amount of cardiovascular energy it takes. Now, I was doing research back in college about VO2 maxes and athletes. And I was surprised to see some athletes at the top. Obviously, we know about things like cycling. Uh, Famously, Lance Armstrong had one of the highest VO2 maxes in the world. He was, I think, in the high 60s or low 70s. But when you look at the highest VO2 max, which is essentially the ability to process oxygen and the ability to compete at high endurance events, the best people in the world are usually either cyclists or they are professional cross country skiers because it is so demanding on the heart to push yourself for that long, and to add it with rifle shooting, pretty interesting in my regard. But the competitions vary slightly depending on what you are doing. Now, it could be one of a few things. It could be the sprint, which is a shorter race. It could be a super sprint, which is a very short race, or it could be an individual, which is the long format race. And the individual one is a 20-kilometer race for men, 15 kilometers for women, and it's skied over 5 laps. The sprint is going to be 10 kilometers for men and 7.5 for women over 3 laps. And then the super sprint is divided into two segments, which is a qualification and a final. Now, this is done like a traditional sprint, but only on a 0.8-kilometer lap and done twice in a row. So very quick in that regard, and it's getting more of a sprint element into it. Um, Through this, it's a very cool sport that tries to replicate one of the ancient pursuits, one of the classic survival pursuits of the time. And I think this is a good episode to just get in that snowy mood. Hopefully, we don't have too much more of it. But it's something that interests me. Anytime we go back to these older traditional sports, especially like the strongman competitions of the Basque region of Spain and the Scottish Highland Games, we get into what is a beautiful blend in my mind of heritage, of survival, of nature, and sports. And it's something that is often forgotten with modern sporting events. With the world's most popular sport, soccer, there's no real survival basis with that. There's nothing rooting it back to anything other than guys kicking a ball around. Same with football, same with baseball, same with major sports like cricket. There's really not anything that really intertwines this event with history, with culture, with time itself. But things like biathlon, things like the Arctic Games, even to some extent, things like sumo wrestling, really bring us back to these older times, these older generations, and the way life used to be. So I know you guys might not have snow where you are. Again, Southern Hemisphere listeners, I'm super jealous of you. But take a little time to appreciate sports for what they are, not only now, but what they were. Because what they were is almost more important than what they are now, especially these things that were irreplaceably linked with survival, such as biathlon. I'm Ben Semnek. This has been my TED Talk, but yeah, that is it. I just can't say enough about all these old sports, all these cool sports that link back to history, and we'll start talking about more of them. There are plenty more out there, but I wanted to talk about this just because of the weather and because I was needed a break from the strongman episodes. So if you guys want more strongman episodes, let me know. There are plenty of strong people. There are men, there are women, plenty of strong people throughout history that have had amazing feats. Let me know if you want to listen to those. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep freewheeling like I am. And if you want to reach out to me and let me know, like, right to my face, just contact me on Instagram. My link is in the show notes at ben.semenak, I think. If you want to reach out to the Building Ambition page, you can do that. We are Building Ambition on both Facebook and Instagram. If you want to send comments, remarks, love letters, or whatever, suggestions for episodes, just reach out to us. Adam and I are always ready, always willing to talk to you guys, always willing to help you reach your goals, and hopefully listen to a little bit of your suggestions. I like getting advice. I like getting recommendations for episodes from everyone, and reach out. We're wide open. Just find us on the internet where you found this. Also, one more thing, gonna keep pushing it. The Apple Podcast reviews. If you are downloading this on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever they're calling it now, just hit the 5-star button. Super easy. Say, hey, I like this. Give a thumbs up. I don't know if you can do emojis. Give a thumbs up. Give something. We do really, really appreciate that. We appreciate all of our listeners. Thank you for tuning in to another Building Ambition podcast mini episode that was actually mini today. Woo, there we go. Keep going forward. Keep your sporting history and cultural ability to do sports alive, and keep building that ambition.